South Korea's top security advisor says the Lee administration plans to focus on resuming dialogue with North Korea next year, noting that the government will continue its role as a pacemaker for potential talks between Pyongyang and Washington. Meanwhile, the presidential office in Yongsan will return to Cheongwade before the end of this year. U.S. Defense Chief Pete Hegseth has urged allies to raise their defense spending, saying model allies like South Korea will get special favor from Washington. He added that those failing to do so could face consequences. Japan has accused China of locking radar on Japanese fighter jets, but Beijing says it was conducting routine training over international waters near Okinawa, adding to tensions that have been flaring up between the two countries over the last several weeks. Hello and welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. We begin today with senior aides at the presidential office briefing the media on the Lee Jae-myung administration's first 6 months in office. Diplomacy, reviving the economy, and bolstering communication were among the key topics. Next year's focus will be on resuming dialogue with North Korea. Our Yoon Jang-min reports.
The South Korean government's push for the Korean Peninsula peace coexistence process will be in full swing next year. That's according to National Security Advisor Ri Sung-rak on Sunday, as the president's senior aides and secretaries briefed the media on the major outcomes of the Lee Jae-myung administration during its first 6 months. When asked whether he would suggest adjusting the South Korea-U.S. joint military exercise to resume dialogue with North Korea, he said he's not considering that.
To resume dialogue, we need to consider what cards we have. There are some possible options. We do not necessarily consider the joint exercise as a card. We will explore various options.
With Pyongyang remaining unresponsive to calls for dialogue, we noted that the South Korean government will continue its role as a pacemaker for possible North Korea-U.S. dialogue. He added it's more likely that bilateral talks with Washington would take place prior to dialogue with Seoul. On the recently announced Korea-U.S. joint fact sheet, the top security office said 3 task forces have been formed on uranium enrichment, nuclear power submarines, and expanding the defense budget.
We are currently working on a roadmap for consultations with the U.S. Discussions with the U.S. have been underway at a working level starting this month, and we expect tangible outcomes in the first half of next year.
On the domestic front, the president's chief of staff, Kang Hoon-sik, said the key focus was restoring the economy and people's livelihoods away from the fallout from the brief martial law imposition by the previous president.
We have established the Emergency Economic Task Force, the very first order by the president, and executed an extra budget to revive people's livelihoods. Spending and demand have revived as we handed out consumption coupons.
Another focus during the past half year was bolstering communication with the public, including televising live weekly cabinet meetings in full and holding town hall meetings. And to end the Yongsan presidential office era, the top office will return to the Cheongwade, the former presidential compound, within the year, with packing and moving expected to be completed around Christmas. Yoon Jang-min, Arirang News.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth mentioned South Korea as an example of a model ally that will receive special favor from the United States for its commitment to increasing defense spending and taking a leading role in its own security. Park Jun-an has more.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said during a speech at the Riga National Defense Forum on Saturday that Washington will grant special favors to model allies, including South Korea. Hegseth explained that countries that step up to share the cost of collective defense fall into this category, and added that those failing to do so could experience repercussions.
Model allies that step up, like Israel, South Korea, Poland, increasingly Germany, the Baltics, and others will receive our special favor. Allies that do not, allies that still fail to do their part for collective defense, will face consequences.
He also hailed South Korea as a model nation that meets the new global standard under U.S. President Donald Trump's presidency.
And just last month, South Korea committed to spend 3.5% of GDP on core military spending and assume the leading role in the ROC's conventional defense.
At the same event, Hexes clarified that U.S. policy toward China aims not for domination, but for a balance of power, adding that the U.S. will pursue wider military-to-military communication to ease tensions between the superpowers.
The second line of effort for the War Department is deterrence against China, through strength, not through confrontation. As I said at Shangri-La earlier this year, we're not trying to strangle China's growth. We're not trying to dominate or humiliate them, not dominating China, but rather ensuring they do not have the ability to dominate us or our allies.
Hex's speech followed the White House release of a new national security strategy last Thursday, which outlines the Trump administration's focus on protecting the U.S. homeland, reinforcing its role in the Western Hemisphere, deterring conflict over Taiwan, and urging allies and partners to take on greater security responsibilities. 박준환, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, both the United States and China made no mention of North Korea nor its denuclearization in their recently released security documents. Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula had been included by the Biden administration and by Trump's first administration in their previous security documents, but has disappeared from the most recent U.S. national security strategy published on Friday local time. China's military white paper, released late November for the first time in 20 years, also made no references to the denuclearization of North Korea. In other news, tensions between China and Japan are now expanding into security issues. Tokyo has raised concerns after a Chinese military jet locked radar on one of its aircraft, but Beijing pushed back, saying that it was conducting routine training over international waters near Okinawa. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Japan is raising strong concerns after a tense aerial encounter with China near Okinawa. Early Sunday, Tokyo confirmed that it launched a formal protest with Beijing after a Chinese J-15 fighter jet launched from the aircraft carrier Liaoning locked on its radar onto Japanese F-15s on Saturday. Officials say the Chinese aircraft intermittently locked on twice, once in the late afternoon for about 3 minutes and again in the evening for roughly 30 minutes. Japan's defense ministry says the radar lock was detected by different Japanese fighters that had scrambled to counter what appeared to be a potential airspace violation. Defense Minister Shinjiro Koizumi called the incident dangerous and extremely regrettable. In both cases, the Chinese jet stayed outside Japanese airspace, and there were no injuries or damage. Meanwhile, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian defended Chinese naval activity, saying operations comply with international law and warning others not to exaggerate China's actions. A spokesperson for the Chinese Navy said Sunday that the Liaoning Carrier Strike Group has been conducting routine training over international waters near Okinawa. According to Beijing, Japanese Air Self-Defense Force jets repeatedly approached the training zone, harassing Chinese operations and posing risks to flight safety. China said it had announced the exercises beforehand, called Japan's version of events inconsistent with the facts, and urged Tokyo to stop what it called slanderous accusations. The radar lock incident comes at a time of deepening strain in bilateral relations. Tensions surged in early November after Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said Japan's military could become involved if China were to take action against Taiwan. Beijing strongly objected, saying Japan was interfering in a core sovereignty issue. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea's industry minister Kim Jung-kwan says the $200 billion Seoul plans to invest in the United States over the next decade will go toward areas that strengthen both countries and expand opportunities for Korean companies. Speaking on YouTube's Hanpro TV on Sunday, he stressed that none of the funds will be wasted. Minister Kim pointed to nuclear power, critical minerals, and artificial intelligence as key sectors where the two countries share strong common interests. He noted that the United States wants to build more nuclear power plants, yet lacks companies capable of constructing facilities or manufacturing equipment, creating significant opportunities for Korean firms. The investment plan follows an October agreement in which South Korea committed $200 billion in direct cash investment, plus an additional $150 billion for industry-led projects such as shipbuilding. Meanwhile, Deputy Prime Minister Koo has called on ministries to finalize their business plans for the upcoming year within December to ensure immediate execution starting New Year's Day. Presiding over a fiscal execution meeting at the government complex Seoul on Monday, Koo emphasized that with the 2026 budget passed by the legal deadline, thorough preparation is crucial to support the stabilization of people's livelihoods and a hyper-innovation economy. Regarding this year's finances, the Deputy Prime Minister stressed the need to minimize unused funds to maintain the momentum of the economic recovery. He added that the government aims to fully execute the supplementary budget by the end of the month, noting that over 98% of the second extra budget had already been spent as of late November. There are special efforts being made to encourage book reading among teenagers and adolescents. In one particular project at an independent bookstore in Cheongju, Chungcheongbuk-do Province, adults anonymously prepay for books so that adolescents can read free of charge. Our Ian-jin tells us the story.
A notice put up at the entrance of this small independent bookstore says that adolescents can take books for free. It promotes a so-called I'll Buy You a Book project that was launched in February, where adults visiting the bookstore can anonymously prepay for books. Then, adolescents visiting the bookstore can take books for free up to the prepaid amount. The project began from a suggestion made by a frequent customer who wanted to encourage and help teenagers to read more.
I really liked that books became more accessible for them. Seeing the number of books they took gradually increase showed that these teenagers don't actually hate reading, they like it.
There is only one condition for this project. The adolescents need to come to the bookstore on their own, without a guardian, and choose the books themselves. The idea is to help them discover their own preferences without outside influence. The process itself has been shown to slowly restore the communication between generations that had faded over time.
I felt that there was a kind of disconnect between generations. But through this project, the students receive warmth from the adults' donations, while the adults feel that they are investing in the future.
Some say that being able to choose the books they want without worrying about cost truly feels like receiving a gift.
There are so many books I want to read, but I can't choose all of them because of cost. So receiving this kind of support feels like a gift. It's my first time experiencing something like this, and it's really nice.
Word of this project has spread through social media, and more than 30 books are being donated each month. This project of sharing that started in a small independent bookstore is opening doors to teenagers who want to read. 이은진, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. In Russia, the Kremlin publicly welcomed President Donald Trump's new national security strategy, calling it, quote, largely consistent with Moscow's vision. The 33-page document released in Washington this week warns of Europe's potential civilizational erasure and said the U.S. should focus on resistance to Europe's current political trajectory. But it did not cast Russia as a U.S. threat. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Sunday described the shift as a positive step. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Ukraine wrapped up 3 days of talks in Florida aimed at drafting a peace deal. But hours after those talks ended, Russian strikes were reported in Kremenchuk and other regions of Ukraine. In the West African country of Benin on Sunday, the government said it had foiled an attempted coup. This came hours after soldiers appeared on national television claiming to suspend the constitution. Beninese President Patrice Talon told citizens the situation was totally under control, praising loyalist forces for removing the mutineers from key sites. Explosions were later heard in the country's largest city of Cotonou after Nigerian fighter jets entered Benin's airspace to help secure the area. Officials said 14 people were arrested. The African Union condemned the coup attempt, and Nigeria called it an assault on democracy. In India on Sunday, authorities opened an inquiry after a fire tore through a nightclub in Goa, killing 25 people. Police said the blaze broke out shortly after midnight at the Birch by Romeo Lane Club in Arpura. Goa's Chief Minister Pramod Sawant said the investigation would determine the cause and responsibility, adding that 6 people who were injured are in stable condition. Prime Minister Narendra Modi offered condolences and announced compensation for the victims' families. Britain's Lando Norris has won his first Formula One world title. The McLaren driver finished third at the season-ending Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in the United Arab Emirates on Sunday, but that was enough to secure the championship by 2 points over race winner Max Verstappen. It marks McLaren's first driver's title since 2008 and makes Norris the 11th British F1 world champion. Chu Ji-hyun, Arirang News.
The weather has been swinging back and forth lately. If you dressed based on yesterday's mild weather, you might easily catch a cold today. Cold air moved in overnight and the temperatures won't climb much even in the afternoon. So it's going to chilly all day today, but with improved air quality. And on the East Coast, dry conditions continue along with strong winds. So even a small spark could spread into a large fire. Once again, fire safety is critical. And this afternoon, highs will be 4 to 8 degrees lower than yesterday. Seoul gets up to 6 degrees Celsius, but with the sharp winds, it's going to feel like 3 degrees. Daegu topping out at 10 degrees under sunny skies nationwide with decent air quality. Now, we are not expecting any severe cold this weekend, but tomorrow morning we are waking up to -2 degrees here in the capital, and we're looking at mix of rain and snow this week, so please keep an eye on the updates.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.
time to set the facts straight. Get Korea right.
안녕하세요. 저는 반크의 정희성 연구원입니다. 반크는 전 세계 외국인에게 한국을 알리기 위해 만들어진 사이버 외교사들 딴이죠. 저도 그중 한 사람이고요. 여러분들의 높은 관심 속에 수많은 한국 오류 정보를 바로잡을 수 있었는데요. 그런데 한국 역사와 관련된 오류 정보들이 여전히 눈에 띄더라고요.